All right. So as I was saying before, what I want to do is show you a little bit in terms of what other students did in terms of using the inverse kinematic for chapter 5, and then also using or doing the Nav Bar. The Nav Bar seems to be where I see the most problem. Just want to emphasize a couple of things in terms of when you're doing the inverse kinematics, this is what it will look like in terms of the setup, in terms of the timeline itself. It'll go on a timeline somewhere. The tween span will be colored in dark green color. Here's the crab type of situation. Each of these parts are separate parts that will compose in terms of when you do your character animation. And as I was saying before, if you want to do frame by frame, you can do frame by frame, which would be a good idea for some of you guys, especially if you're using Adobe CC when you're going to do character animation. So basically, this is what we're talking about. So if I roll over or go to animation, character, you'll set some up that'll look something like that. In terms of the navigation, meaning is you set up a nav bar, a drop-down nav bar. This is what we're talking about, okay? So then when I roll out, it disappears. When I roll over it, it drops down, right? And then I select wherever I want to go in terms of mask or whatever type of, wherever you want the button to point to. So that pretty much is pretty easy in terms of, in terms of setting up the buttons, right? It's a regular button and so on. But let's look at that in terms of how it's set up on the nav or on the timeline. So as you can see right here, the student put everything in terms of the nav bar, that drop-down nav bar, in one folder. Okay, you may want to do that. It's up to you guys. But you'll notice that, let me move my playhead to it right here. So you'll notice that, again, on the frame that when it gets to the nav bar, the very first thing you're going to do is very important. You're going to put a stop action. Okay? So there needs to go a stop action in terms of that. Notice again, this person put all the actions, which is the correct way to do it, on one layer. And it's all the way on the top, which is always, again, a good idea to do that because you can always find it easily. So again, you put the stop action up here so that when you tell it to, from the main time bar, main page to go to this frame right here, it'll stop right there. Now, you'll notice that the background, here's the background right here, I'm selecting it. It's in one layer. This home button is in the same layer, okay? This button right here, the button that's going to be rolled over is in a different layer. And it could be on the same layer as this nav bar right here where it says nav bar, that where this button is and where this button is. It could be in that same layer. It doesn't have to be in a separate layer. But the more important thing is this. You'll notice down at the bottom right here, it says nav mask and then nav button. So when I select this right here, these are the three buttons that the nav buttons is where you're going to place it. And also, and very important, notice that on this frame right here where the nav button, which are these buttons right here, the drop down nav button, it doesn't show up, it's cleared, it's empty at the beginning. You see? So right at the beginning, it's not showing up because it's empty. Then you set up a mask. You'll learn how to how to set up a mask in a few minutes. But basically, you'll notice again that it stops right here, and then the mask itself is animated. And let me show you how that works. I'm going to be able to see the mask, I have to click on the locks right here. And notice when I move the playhead, as soon as I move it, it shows it animates down. You see? Then it's showing it. Now when I get rid of it, this is the mask right here when I turn it off. This is what we're talking about of the mask. It's basically an object that just animates. See, it's animating from the top and then animates down. So again, think of a mask as a regular mask, you know, where it has holes in it. And so anything behind it's going to show through. This becomes the mask. This block right here becomes the mask. And as soon as I roll over it, or as soon as this moves from here to here, it moves, and then we're able to see what's behind that, that rectangle. Watch when I turn it back on or lock it. Then we're able to see that. And that's what shows up when we test it out. So when we test it out, it stops right here. Then when I roll over this button right here, it tells it to go to this frame right here. And then basically what it does, it starts to, the mask starts to roll down. As it rolls down, it reveals what's there. When it's up here, it's not, this doesn't show at all. Watch when I turn it on, you see? But when I move it down, or when I move my playhead, and then what it does, you'll notice it stops right here. There's a stop action right here, you see? So again, going back to the timeline, let's look at the buttons now. When I click on this button, let me turn this off, so I'm able to select the button. When I select this button, you'll notice it has the action script on release, go to and play 3. So it goes to frame 3 for the tween, and then the character, you know, wherever the animation starts. So pretty standard in terms of setting that up. Now here's the other interesting part. Right behind here, notice there's this layer. So all this right here has to do with creating this nav bar, right? This layer right here, which is part of this nav bar, is called the invisible button layer. Now you can't see the button itself. So watch what I have to do. Well, it's actually, you'll notice right here, it doesn't exist all the way onto this last frame. So when I get to here, then I'm able to click it. We couldn't see it before, right? And the reason why is because the student decided to make it, not decided, but the book tells you to make it invisible. Okay, and the way you do that is you make a rectangle, and then you put, and then you make the under color effects, under the alpha. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Oh, the student made it white. Okay. It's supposed to be that this is supposed to be a alpha of 0. So for instance, let me do this, change this color, say to red. Notice, even though it's red, because I made the alpha, now see here's the, so you can see this invisible button right here in the back, right? When I test it out, if I leave it that way, see it shows up. And what it's supposed to do, obviously it's not supposed to show in the back. The idea is that as soon as I roll over to the button itself, it sends it to the next frame, or back to the frame where it starts off, when you get to here, so that you can't see the background buttons. Okay, so that's the idea. So watch again what is supposed to be happening. So the idea is, as soon as my playhead gets here, because I tell it to move to the next frame, and then when I roll over this button, you'll notice the action script is on rollover, not on release. Release means that when you press the left mouse button and you let it go. On rollover means when you roll over that object. So that's this red object right here. So on rollover, send it to 257. You'll notice 257 is right here. Is that 257? No, that's 258. Sorry. 257 is right here, where you don't, the mask moves up, and then you don't see the buttons again. Pretty understand that? So there's a lot of different little components here that need to work. Now, watch again. Here's what I want you to do instead, though, in terms of the invisible button, to make it invisible. So I want you to select it. Now, here's the, again, remember, and it's important, that's all the way down at the bottom, in the back of everything, and that it starts off right about here. Let me turn this as a, I'm going to put this so that's only the outline show. So again, here's the invisible button. Notice where it starts off right about this line right here. If it's a little too way up, if you roll over it, if it's up here and you roll over it right here, it's going to send it back to frame 257. So again, it's important that when you roll over it, or that when you set it up, that it's set up so that it's on the back, the bottommost layer of that nav bar, and that it's invisible by selecting it and changing the alpha to 0. Or a better way yet is to double click on the button. Remember, it's a button. Notice when I double click it, I'm in the editing mode. In the up state, take that keyframe, just select it, click and drag it to the hit frame. The hit frame basically designates the area that a button will be active. Okay, so now watch when I go back to scene 1, it's got an aqua color to it, indicating that it's invisible because I've moved the hit state into, or I moved the up state keyframe to the hit state. Again, notice this again. When I double click it, oops, wrong one. Notice the keyframe is not on the up state. The up state is empty. But the hit, you can see the button, right? Now when I test it one more time, here's my nav bar. Notice the red square doesn't show in the back anymore because it's invisible. So as I roll over the animation button, which has on rollover, not on hit, then everything else I can select it. But as soon as I move my cursor just away from this area, and these buttons have to be really almost touching each other. They have to be right on top of each other. If there's a gap, it'll hit the back, that invisible button, and then what it'll send it, to the beginning of that nav bar, which is in this case frame 257. Okay. Everybody understand that? Okay. So hopefully you understand that idea, and again, you'll notice, and I just want to make sure you understand that, where you can put this whole section of this whole setup right here, you can put that in anywhere within your timeline, as long as you have all those different layers for it set up. Okay. Now, yeah. So basically, as I was saying, the other thing I wanted to go over, I think. Well, let me just double check here. I think that was it, really. Yeah, I think that's the most important part, and is that nav bar. Again, if you're using this type of thing, if you're doing on CS6, you'll be able to do the inverse kinematic, which is this tool right here, okay, the bone tool, and so on. If you're in CS6 or CC, you'll notice that you don't have that tool anymore. That tool is gone. So that means what you need to do is that you need to do basically frame by frame animation. But it has to be a character animation. And if you're using CS6, you don't have to do the inverse kinematic using the bone tools. You can do the same thing as if you were using it in CC. Now, the other thing I want to make sure you understand, if you're using CC, basically, what I wanted you to see here is that the action script, this one did it over here, everything is set up the same, right? Except it says mouse event dot, and before it said click right here, right? For the rollover state. Instead now, for ActionScript 3.0, you're just going to do everything, set up everything the same, like you would for a button, but you're going to use rollover for the button where it's going to roll over. So again, for like this button right here. So in the case, so this is the button that's going to receive the action script for it to roll when you go over it, to roll over and go to the next frame, which is this frame right here. And then have the mask come down. All right, so let me do a quick little lesson on the mask. So a lot of people get that one a little confused also. So for instance, say I have some text. Let's make this really large. So I'm going to type in my name. So this is my object, and it could be anything in the background, right? Or it could be a button or whatever. Now, this right here is the layer where the object is going to be. I'm going to create a new layer, and then that layer is where I'm going to have my mask. So for instance, I'll create this other object. It could be red, it could be any color. Okay? The thing is that what's going to happen is when I want to do an animation, or I want part of that text to show, well, actually, let me make this a different color so you don't confuse the fact that this is, let me make this blue. Okay, so get rid of the, so notice this is blue and the text is red. And if I right mouse click, again, the mask is going to be on top. So this is the layer where the mask is going to be, and this could be, you know, that drop-down object that I was talking about before. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to select mask. Notice it all disappears, right? Because the mask is not over the letter. So watch when I turn it or unlock this. So I'm going to select my text, or in this case, the rectangle. Now watch when I turn it back on or lock it, I can see part of that object that's behind it. Notice again, this is indented. You did it correctly if you see these icons, these little green icons, and it's indented. Now to animate it, it's very simple, right? We're going to animate so that it goes across. So right now when I test it out, all we see is that, right? So I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to right mouse click. Now this, to animate it, we need to convert it to a symbol. So I'm going to select it, modify, convert to symbol. It could be a graphic. It's a rectangle. There's the bounding box around it. It's a symbol now. Shows right there as a symbol. Now I can select this layer, right mouse click, create motion tween. And then I'm going to click and drag it. Let me turn this back on. Well, actually, I need to extend also my text. So I'm going to select this last layer, right mouse click, insert frame. So now it's, it's extended out, but I haven't animated it. So I'm going to select my mask, click and drag, just like you were doing your regular animation. And notice now this is what's happening, right? If it's not a layer, this is all it's going to do. I mean, if it's not a mask, all it's going to do is just move back and forth. But when I, because it is a mask and I lock these two layers, notice that wherever the rectangle is, that's what shows up. So there's your mask. Okay? Any questions about that? All right, I think that should hopefully help you out in terms of creating the mask and and setting that whole nav bar situation. So that's it.